Good morning. Today's lesson is factoring quadratic expression when a is not 1 or a does not equal 1. And remember that a is in reference to the standard form of a quadratic, ax squared plus bx plus c. So a is the coefficient of our squared term. And we'll talk about that. This is an extension of the factoring that we've been doing for this entire section. So your last flex assignment was factoring quadratics, and in these types of problems you had to factor completely, and the thing that kept our a value from being 1 happened to be a common factor throughout the expression. So you found in number 2, if we factored out -1 from a in the entire expression, then we could factor, and now a equals 1. Similarly, in 4, we factored out a -6, and once you factored out that -6, then you could factor as usual, where your c term is here if you made your t-chart to do some guess and check, and your b term is on the right. The two numbers that multiply, you're trying to find those two numbers that multiply to get the c value and add to get the b value. And again, every time you could factor out a greatest common factor, and that would force a to equal 1. So we've done problems like this, and then this is back to 2 lessons ago where we just had an a value of 1, and then you could just simply find those two values that multiplied to get your c value and added to get your b value. And so in today's lesson, we'll start out with similar problem where we can just recognize what is our a value. A is 1, b is 15, c is 50. So two numbers that multiply to get 50 and add to get 15. We just looked at a similar problem where c was 50. So two numbers that multiply to get 50, 10 and 5. Those are the first two that come to mind, and those add up to get 15. Works out well. And remember, for these types of problems, we would put the variable first in the two groups of parentheses, and then these two values. Oh, doesn't matter actually which one goes where, as long as you have the right sign in the right spot, and that would be our factored form. And then problems, oh, this is the assignment that I just looked at. So there's number 1 from the flex assignment that we did last time. And now we have this new level of problem where if we look at this lead coefficient, our a value is 3, b is 2, and c is -16. And if we tried to factor out a 3, it wouldn't work. It doesn't go into 2, it doesn't go into -16. So we, in our t-chart now, are actually going to multiply a times c. And that would work here as well. If we multiplied a times c, a is just 1. Okay, so it's not actually changing things where it doesn't apply to those simpler problems. We just didn't need to think about the a value since it was 1. So now we're doing 3 times -16. Right, and that's going to be a -48. And then we multiply, or sorry, we just put our c value, b value here in the second column. So two numbers that multiply to get -48, 6 times 8 comes to mind first. Since they add together to get a positive and multiply to get a negative, I know the smaller of the two would be negative, and that works out. Here is where the main difference comes in. Now, this method is sometimes called split the middle. Split the middle. So we're going to take this original expression, 3n squared plus 2n minus 16, and we are going to split the middle. We know negative 6 and 8 add to get 2. So I'm just going to rewrite 3n squared minus 6n, yes, thank you, plus 8n minus 16. And now I have 4 terms, and that should look familiar. This is now factor by grouping. So we can look at this as 2 groups, where we factor out GCF of 3n squared and 6n, that's going to be 3n. I'm doing notes right now, I can tell you in a minute. So we have left 3n squared divided by 3n is n, 6n divided by 2n is 2, 6n divided by 3n is 2. And factoring out the GCF of 8n and 16, that would be 8. So then that leaves us with n minus, again, dividing. 8n divided by 8 is n. Got the minus sign here, and 16 divided by 8 is 2. And now we notice this common factor of n minus 2, which is going to be our first factor, and then our leftovers here, the 3n and the plus 8. And that's our answer. So if we go back and we kind of identify these steps that we just went through, we'll cross out number 2. You don't need to do number 2. So the first step that we did was identify A, B, and C. Second step is to make your T-chart. And again, the left side you have A times C, and on the right side we have B. And we're trying to find the 2 numbers that multiply to get B, or A times C, and add to get B. Step 3 is where we actually split the middle here. So it's the middle is the B term. So split the middle. We're using those 2 values that we found that worked out, and they go here and here, splitting our B value. And then finally we factor by grouping. So let's do a couple more. Excuse me. Step 1, A, B, and C. A is 2, B is 7, C is negative 15. A lot of times people go wrong when they don't remember to carry the negative sign, or notice that the value is positive. So our A times C here is going to be 2 times negative 15, that's negative 30, and then our B value is 7. So 2 numbers that multiply to get negative 30, what comes to mind? Maybe a 2 and a 15. Again, this is negative, so one of these has to be negative, but they add to get a positive, so that means the smaller has to be negative. Negative 2 and 15 is 13. Didn't work. Okay, so let's say 3 and 10. So let's go negative 3 and 10. That adds up to get 7, and those will be the 2 values I use to split my 7a, my B value. 2a squared minus 3a plus 10a minus 15. Right? Made the T-chart, split the middle, now I factor by grouping. Deek. Okay, so here's a question that often comes up. Does it matter where I put the negative 3 and the 10? Answer is no, doesn't matter. So it might work out differently on what is on the outside and what's on the inside, but in the end, you'll actually still get the same two factors. So 2a squared and 3a, those have a common factor of a. Factoring that out, we have 2a minus 3a divided by a, that's going to be 3, plus 10a and minus 15, that's going to be a 5. So 10a divided by 5 is 2a. 15 divided by 5, remember there's a minus sign there, that's 3. And you see again, there's our common factor of 2a minus 3, and then our leftovers of a plus 5. I'll do one more. A, B, and C. So I'm going to write this off to the side. A is 7, B is negative 18, C is negative 9. If there's not enough space on this paper, please, please, please grab an extra sheet of paper. It's nice to have the room that you need. Then I'm going to make my t-chart. 7 times negative 9 is negative 63. Again, that's my A times C. My B value is negative 18. Two numbers that multiply to get negative 63. So I know 3 goes into that. So 3 goes in 2 times and 1 times, so 21. They multiply to get a negative, add to get a negative, so that means my bigger number has to be negative. 3 plus negative 21, and that is negative 18. That worked out. Now I'm splitting my middle. My b term is now going to become 2 terms. So 7v squared plus 3v minus 21v minus 9. Group 7v squared plus 3v, those only have a v in common. So that leaves me with a 7v plus 3. 21v and, okay, so this is a minus 21v and a minus 9, so that's going to be a minus 3. And negative 21v divided by negative 3 is 7v. Negative 9 divided by negative 3, that's going to be plus 3. Common factor here, 7v plus 3. And then my leftovers, v minus 3. And so this is all factoring quadratic expressions when a is not equal to 1. And this is using the split the middle method.